My name is Jim Perkins. I'm with the Quorum Group. I'm a deal maker at the Quorum Group. Quorum Group, for people who weren't here the last session, is a mergers and acquisitions firm. We represent sellers of companies, and I specialize in the gaming industry, both in the video gaming industry and the casino gaming industry. We've been around for 28 years. We've done about 300 transactions worth almost $8 billion. And I'm here to talk to you today about what to do and what not to do when preparing for and selling your company. So this is based on 28 years of experience in our business. It's also based on what I learned as we went through selling the companies that I've sold and I've bought, my own companies, and from other companies that I've seen in the industry. My background is the video game industry. I was fortunate to be associated with some of the best developers in the world, id Software, Epic, 3D Realms, and many others. We did a lot of, in the early days, shareware, which is very similar to what is free to play now. And it's great to see the resurgence of value in the studios that exist in doing free to play. It also makes the market very, very good for acquisitions. It sends the value of your companies up because there are a lot of companies out there throughout the world that are looking for your technology, your platforms, your games, and they really need to buy you to get that competitive advantage in the marketplace, whether it be just in Asia or just in North America or Europe or worldwide. So again, this is, I'm going to quickly go through this, the do's and don'ts. And right after this, we're going to have 4 sellers here on a panel that are going to relate their personal experiences with selling their companies and or raising money for their companies to grow, and so on. So let me quickly go through this. Introduced ourselves, told you about Quorum already. We are based in Zurich here, and we're also based in Seattle in the US, so we are worldwide. The reason we are is because 60% of all M&A happens cross-border. Keep that in mind when you're looking for buyers for your company. They exist everywhere. They don't just exist in your neck of the woods, or they don't just exist with the people that you're currently dealing with. We go through what, and this is going to be important in understanding the do's and don'ts. The optimal outcome process takes a team approach. There's a lot of work to be done when you sell your company, so keep that in mind, and I'll explain that a little more and what to avoid in terms of that workload and taking your eye off the ball within your own company. Very important to keep focusing on what you do while you're selling your company. So what is the optimal outcome? Well, the optimal outcome is not only getting the most for your company, but it's putting together a structure that works. The best way to structure a deal for you as sellers of your company is to get as much cash as possible and to limit your liability. You don't want to be attached to 2, 3, 4-year earnouts that are highly dependent on the buyer of your company. If they're running the show, if they own your company, they can change the strategy, they can change the direction in any way possible. So minimize your risk, minimize your liability, and get as much cash as possible off the table. So the structure of the deal is critical. You want to make sure you reduce the tax as much as possible. That tax implication can change the value of your deal by 50 or 60%. So you want to make sure that that tax implication when you sell your company is important, is taken into consideration. Also, think about the structure. On a previous panel, we had buyers up here. We were talking about the structure of deals and what happens after you sell your company. What is the plan for when you're now part of a larger company in Asia or in New York or in South America or in Paris? What does that look like? Are they making you move to Shanghai? Are they, what's expected of you? Make sure that that integration plan, that structure of the deal after is laid out before you close the deal. Employment agreements are very important. Making sure that you retain your team is very important, and making sure that you incentivize your team to continue to perform when you've sold the company. And we talked about integration as well. As far as achieving the optimal outcome, there's a number of steps you should take in terms of getting the most you can for your company. That includes preparation. As we said before in the previous session, and we'll go through it again when we have sellers up here, make sure you have all your documents ready, your books in order, your contracts in order before you go to market. Have all those materials ready before you go to market. A buyer is not interested in waiting 3 weeks for your materials after they've expressed interest in your company. They want that material now, and that's going to keep their interest. Research is a very important part of that process, making sure you know who those buyers are and making sure that you've done your homework on who in those companies, who in those buyers you should be talking to. It's not the vice president of product development. In fact, the vice president of product development probably doesn't want you part of that firm because you're a threat to them. It's the CEO of the company. It's the decision makers that at the board level or at the CEO level and the CFO level that are there to increase the value of their company by acquiring your company. Making sure you have the right contact. Again, it's not the vice president of marketing or the vice president of development. It's the CEO and the CFO. Discovery. As you go through that process, the interested buyers, and they should be buyers, not just one buyer, should be looking at what they are going to buy. So again, make sure you have all your materials ready to do that discovery. Go through the negotiation process quickly and get to the point where you get a letter of intent that it's detailed and lays out the terms of the acquisition of your company. It's not just a one-line email from the CEO saying, I'm going to buy your company for $20 million. It's a formal letter of intent. It's a non-binding letter of intent. There's probably an exclusivity period in there where they can do their due diligence, but make sure you get that in writing in detail. Then the due diligence starts. You limit the time that company, that buyer has the time to do that due diligence. Make sure it's ready. Make sure there's no loose ends because it's not to your benefit that this goes on for a long period of time. Otherwise, the buyer will lose interest. Finally, the closing. The definitive agreement is worked out. The signing of the definitive agreement happens, and you're done. Money goes into the bank, and then that integration process happens. That, again, should be laid out ahead of time so that you know what you're expected to do, where you're going to be located, who's on your team, and where you're reporting. Okay, interesting. This is the fun part, avoiding deal disasters. And I break this up into things like workload, value destroyers, and deal killers. One of the biggest parts of selling your company is the workload involved in doing so. There's a lot of documents that are required of you to get that deal done. Legal documents, financial projections, employment agreements, all of that needs to be in place. And when you look at that workload, there's probably 60 documents or projects that are going on that will happen during that sale of your company. And half of those require outside resources. They require your accountant, they require your lawyer, they require your advisor in terms of selling the company, they require opinions and all of that. The most important thing to remember here is that you need to continue to run your company, continue to grow your company while you're selling your company. If you lose focus, the company will start to drop off, and the sales will drop off, and it'll become obvious. And that'll decrease the value of your company. So all of that workload needs to be carried out by the right people. Very important. Let's talk about value destroyers. All right. The number one key value destroyer here is going to the market too late. If there are trends going on within the business, you see acquisitions happening within the gaming industry, and you're in that space, you need to move quickly. If you're late coming to the table, your value is pretty much going to be destroyed. I've seen Google and Yahoo. Alina referred to Yahoo buying a lot of different companies, especially in the gaming space. That's an indication to you that you need to think about going to market sooner than later. Because later, if they've already bought the companies that they need and they don't buy yours, your value is diminished. Again, we talked about where on the CEO and management. Make sure you're running your business. Make sure you're running and successfully growing your business while you go through the M&A process. Otherwise, the value will be destroyed. And that is associated with business drop-off. Confidentiality, it's very important as you go through discovery with buyers to stage the dissemination of information. So at the beginning, you'll give the buyer certain information, but you won't give them the secret sauce. You won't give them everything, the code, otherwise you're done. They've already got what they wanted. Theft of technology is another factor in there, and loss of staff to some extent. Okay, top 10 deal killers. The number one by far in terms of killing a deal is dealing only with one buyer. When you're selling your company, you need to have more than one buyer at the table. You need to have buyers competing to buy your business. That sends the value of your business up. And it says to the other buyers at the table that there are obviously other interested parties, and that they need to step up to the plate. They need to move quickly. They need to make the right offer. They need to make sure that their management is called to action to make sure this deal happens. So you need to be dealing with more than one buyer simultaneously. If you're dealing with one buyer, what happens? They're setting the time frame, they're setting the price, it's not beneficial to you. Contact at the wrong level, I discussed this briefly. You need to be dealing with the CEO, CFO of that buyer, or the Senior Vice President of Corporate Development. Do not deal with the Vice President of Research, Product Development, Marketing, so on. Those people could potentially kill the deal because they could be threatened by the acquisition of your company. Improper research of potential buyers. You could spend years looking at what you think is the right buyer out there, and in fact waste that time and find out at the end of the process that those 3 buyers that you contacted had no interest or had no ability to buy your company, but they were just fishing for information or ideas on games or whatever other things that you were working on. Misalignment. Make sure everybody that owns the company is on the same page as you, that you are selling the company. No surprises here that your partners all of a sudden find out that you've got buyers at the table and you want to sell the company, and that's the first they've heard about it. Make sure they're on board. Misunderstanding the buyer process. As I said before, do as much due diligence on the potential buyers in your sector as they will do on you. Find out what they're about, how they make decisions, if they're reputable. If they've made acquisitions before, ask to talk to those people that have been acquired already and see what they say about that acquisition. Inability to portray value. Before you go into negotiations with potential buyers, multiple buyers, you need to know what you're worth. Make sure you know what you feel you're worth. Don't give that buyer any idea what you're thinking. Let them make the first offer, let them make the offer, and have another buyer make another offer, and you'll get an idea of what they're willing to pay. And if it's in the range that you're willing to take, great. But you need to know ahead of time that you're saying, I know I'm worth $25 million, and if somebody offers me $3 million, I'm not even going to consider it. Improper due diligence prep, very, very important. Have all your due diligence in place. Make sure you've got everything, contracts and financials in place and ready to go. Not qualifying the buyers properly, again, do due diligence on those buyers. Orchestrating the buyers all simultaneously. Make sure everybody that is seriously interested in your company is being worked on at the same time simultaneously. And one of the biggest deal killers is ego. A good example of that is where you've been offered $100 million for your company. We could all be so lucky. And you think after that, well, if somebody's going to pay me $100 million for the company, there's going to be somebody else out there that it's going to pay me $150 million for the company. No, they're not. You've got to be realistic. Don't let your ego get in the way. Don't let greed in the way. You want to make sure, you want to be realistic about that value. They're coming in with the value that they feel is right for your company. Okay, so let's wrap it up here, and then we're going to go to our seller panel. Anybody know what percentage of self-managed M&A transactions fail, meaning you try to do it yourself? Take a guess. It is actually very close to 90%. It's 80%, but it's higher than that now. It's going up. There's so many complexities to selling your company. There's so many different things involved and workload involved that it just, ultimately you can't handle the workload because you need to be running your business. You also need to be dealing with multiple buyers, and you really need help in doing that simultaneously. Using an intermediary, it tells the buyer that you are serious. It also tells the buyer that they're not the only bidder, and it also says that if they're not the only bidder as the buyer, it's going to be really bad. It could be really bad if I don't get your company. If I can't buy your company and somebody else does in a competitive space, then I'm in trouble. But it'd be great if I could. So the price of the company goes up. In fact, on average, after what is the average improvement from the first offer of LOI? Okay, what do you think it is? How much value do you think it goes up from that time? It's about 50%. Pretty significant, pretty significant. All right, so that's very quickly the do's and don'ts of selling your software company. Can I answer any questions before we go to the sellers panel? Yep. How much of that 48% would we take? I've never had that question. We take a percentage of the total deal, and it's our job to get that deal up by 48% or more. When I sold my software company, I got Quorum involved, and it went up 300%. And the reason it did was because I had brought multiple buyers to the table. So it more than paid for that fee, and that fee is set ahead of time. So just keep getting that price up. And because we're paid, or another intermediary or investment banker should be paid on performance, and make sure they are, they're motivated to get the price of the company up as well. They're in the same boat as you. Other questions? All right, let's move to our sellers panel very quickly here. I know we have two right here. I think we're looking for two more.